Welcome to Leading with Curiosity. Command and control leadership is dead. We interview leaders, entrepreneurs, and executive coaches challenging old paradigms and fostering cutting-edge leadership. Here's your host, certified executive coach, Nate Leslie.
Hey listeners, I'm excited to speak with my guest today. We're going to explore the value and the sacredness of being in service of others. Stephen Morrow focuses his executive coaching practice on senior leaders who take responsibility for their own growth and want an insightful coach who can help them see what they need to do to get to the next level, both within the company and as a human being. He's based in Denver, Colorado, and he's had clients in Turkey, Germany, the Netherlands, Chile, Mexico, South Africa, Brazil, the US, and Canada. I was introduced to Stephen through episode 8's Dan Konigsberg, CEO of CampMinder. Dan caught my attention when speaking about his experience working with Stephen. "I'd be dead without a coach" were the powerful words Dan used to describe the impact of his coaching experience. Stephen, welcome to Leading with Curiosity.
Thanks so much. So good to be here.
Right on. And I see you are in CampMinder's office as we speak. That seems appropriate.
Yeah, it just worked out to have. I just got done coaching Dan, so I am all lit up with my coachful self.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Your episode is actually following his due out. It'll be due out in about a month, which for listeners is going to be around the end of June. So let's dive into this idea of the sacredness of the opportunity to be in a leadership role. What would you like to share about that?
So, one of the things I like to say is right now, you're at work, right? Or maybe, listeners driving to work or as at work. And we kind of tend to separate work and home or work, we have our work that's somehow compartmentalized. And really, what I find the power of people that we really follow are in the moment or living their values all the time. So a lot of the work that I do is helping people identify their values. I mean, it's always kind of interesting when you ask someone like, okay, so what are your values? That is not a ready answer for most folks. So they'll usually stammer for a little bit and then come with respect, integrity, leave it better than you found it. Those are ones that I hear a lot. Mm-hmm. So the very beginning of that, even that journey is really relevant because you are doing this most important thing called building your life. So we are in fact the I think about building, we're putting a brick in right now as you and I are spending time together, and, whoever's listening, like that's a choice. And so we're in some ways writing what's on our tombstone right now. And often, if we think about consciousness or intention and this idea of like, okay, wait a minute, if I'm not really clear about what I want my life to be about, then I'll be 99 years old, looking at my sweetie on the porch and saying, well, that happened. Mm-hmm. Versus what I really go for is you at 99 years old, you want to be able to look at your sweetie and sip your iced tea and say, that was a really good ride.
Nice.
So this idea of what even is that? And then within the workplace, what's really cool is it really gives us an opportunity to work with our values. I mean, our families do as well. And it kind of depends on your family or whatever else you got going on outside of work in terms of how much opportunity you have to be challenged. But at work, for most of us, we're getting challenged one after the next. Like how do, if I'm going to say kindness, respect, integrity, leave it better than I found it are my values, I have opportunities today to work with each of those and really be excellent at each of those. And that's really what I find really interesting about life. So we like to say that the wind makes the tree strong. So the stresses or challenges that we face are really opportunities for us to get much closer to our values and really embody them. And then also leave an incredible impact because as leaders, we've all had good bosses and bad bosses. And when you have a bad boss, you go home grumpy and you pour a bourbon or whatever you do, like it takes a while to recover. Whereas when you have a boss that really lights you up and inspires you and works with you, it has a ripple. You go in, you can hug your kids, you can, you are really much more available. So as leaders, it's really important to remember, like, I have so much impact on not only myself, or the people I work with and their families. Let me really touch that, really bring that into myself and understand what I'm doing. I'm not working on a presentation for my 3:00. I'm changing lives. I mean, that's real.
Right. Man, one of my favorite things about doing this podcast, Stephen, is every great leader and every great coach that I talk to has a unique position, but these common themes come up. And a seasoned coach, Ross Martin, just said to me the other day, it's one thing for a leader to show up every 2 weeks with their coach and talk about their leadership challenges. It's an entirely other thing to think every minute of the day, passing the water cooler, passing someone's office on a Zoom call, what impact am I having right now in this moment, every moment of the day as a leader? And that's just what I heard you say, in your own unique way. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah. And right. For sure. Very exciting.
Gosh. And that when someone goes home, whether it's the difference of having a bourbon or two, right, and hugging your kids and going out and being energized by what just happened during the day at work and going for a bike ride. I mean, day after day after day, those are dramatically different lives you're bringing home, right?
Right.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about your journey into coaching, into this role, from what I believe was the other side of leadership and being a leader in organizations, into coaching. What can you share?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, a couple of things we could look at. There's a couple of different ways that that all came together. One is that I just, I was in IT in the sales wing as a solution architect. So, I'd usually ride with a sales guy that, owned the deal, and I own the delivery. So big deals like Core's outsourced all their IT. So I was the one responsible for architecting. How are we going to do that in an outsourced model? And I just want to be a better person. So I started doing some personal work, kind of going into the woods and, dancing around the fire and facing my demons, which I completely recommend. The one that everybody thinks about is Tony Robbins, right? Walking on fire. I've never done that one, but I've definitely been in places where the facing myself felt plenty hot, plenty like walking on coals. And I just did it for me. And I did most of my work in an organization called the New Warriors, or the Mankind Project. That's all kind of the same thing. Okay. And it's really about authenticity. It's a men's organization. It's about authenticity and figuring out what your mission is, whatever that is. If you want to be of service or impact the world in some way, what is that you really want to do? And in the middle of that, as I really got more involved in that, people say, "Hey, look, you need to figure out how to do this kind of work for a living." And I didn't even know anything about coaching school or anything, but I did find out that there was coaching schools, and I went just for me. And actually, what I thought I was going to do when I was in coaching school was be a coach to caregivers. So one of the other big parts of the journey is, so when I was 23 and been married for 3 months, my wife was diagnosed with high-grade brain cancer.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Yeah.
Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. It's one of those things I wouldn't wish it on anybody, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. So she was supposed to live for a year and live for 10. And in the middle of that, she chose gratitude and joy all the time. And I will tell you, Nate, we lived in the hospital. We were in the hospital like 100 nights a year because she was a college athlete going in at 23. But the chemo just destroyed her immune system. So she re-got the chicken pox, she re-got measles, stuff that all kinds of stuff. So we were just in and out. And even in the middle of just ridiculous pain and tests and fear, she chose to be grateful for what was happening, what this moment. And
Wow.
so I kind of come to it in my mind. I realize it's a mental construct, but I really like it. We had a sacred contract where we agreed kind of at the soul level that she was gonna work through her own journey in that, and then my job is to watch that and teach that actually you can have a perspective in the face of the most awful possible situation that is expansive and kind and grateful.
Wow. Wow.
So I get to bring that into my coaching of helping people bring an expansive and grateful perspective, no matter what they're facing. And then as soon as we do that, it's kind of like loosening the knot. Then people had so much more ability to engage powerfully as a grown-up and in a positive way.
Yeah. Oh, thanks
we can
for
all
sharing
get trapped we can all get trapped into the drama, whatever that is. Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. And how, in that time since then, how have you seen the impact of coaching, the acceptance of coaching in leadership evolve?
It's an industry that's on fire for sure. I think that, just people, in my experience, in corporate or non-corporate, right? There's a lot of, now there's a whole industry of coaches of all sorts. So I would say and I've been doing 17 years, the amount of coaches and coaching has increased, I think, in every sector.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And when I talk to people who have been in it a long time, they talk about this notion that it was perceived as originally as some kind of remedial work, like so-and-so needs to change. And there's an element of that if in a toxic culture, perhaps, but more so now being able to share it as a development opportunity for leaders, like Dan talked about in the interview, just the impact that it can have on that clarity and living the values every day. Just what's your experience been like that, sort of in the perception over the years?
Let me make sure I understand your question. The value, you mean the value, or whether we've switched from remedial to a development opportunity? You're asking my experience of that, or is there a narrower question you had?
That's a great question. For the listeners, a lot of listeners don't know a ton about coaching, and they've heard of this thing and maybe saw it before they had experienced it, maybe as this thing like, like I'm just talking really practically here. Right. Someone who hasn't had the experience in it and gets the chance to might often go into it thinking that something's going to be fixed or they've done something wrong. And I mean, we all have blind spots, but just that perception in organizations.
Yeah.
The growth of it now as being really embraced as this development opportunity to increase your leadership effectiveness.
Yeah, right. I would definitely say the organizations generally. Dan is one. Like, he owns his own. Well, now a investment group owns it. Good for him, right? But he built it out of the ground, and I started coaching him when he was the owner. But the companies that hire me, like I think about, the Fortune 500 companies that hire me, almost. I'm just thinking about, like, is there any exceptions, but really hire me for their top performers. So someone's top 9 box, someone who's potential CEO or potential, SVP, C-level, they want to invest in that person. Mm-hmm. And that's really where they bring me in. So I usually get to say, I get to work with Olympic athletes, meaning people that are so good at their craft, whatever they're doing. And then when we talk about, but can you get 1,000 people to follow you, or can you get really tough customers to say, hey, well, you got to talk to, Nate, like he's the guy. Mm-hmm. Those questions, that's even a different level of mastery of leadership.
Right.
And so that's really where I generally enter, is when you have someone who's just fantastic and they're like, okay, but I often use this metaphor for any of us or any of our listeners, that that watch football or specifically in the NFL. So I'm going to use a sports metaphor. So anybody, please stay with me. But what's really interesting is there's like 30 million men of playing age in the United States that are like, could play, between 18 and 40, could play quarterback in the NFL, right? But what we know is there's like 3 that can throw the football, right? There's like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. Everybody else is kind of, mediocre. So isn't that so interesting, right? Out of these 30 million men, there's 3 that are really good at their craft. So we start to think about like, why is that? And the same thing's true in leadership. Like we've all had bad leaders or mediocre leaders. There's very few people like, oh, my leader's amazing. Why? Because it's really super hard. It's really, really, really super hard to achieve this level of mastery where you just have consistent followership across the spectrum of people you engage with. So it's really fun to work with, those folks on what needs to happen, what differentiates a leader in that, top 3 out of 30 million people. Wow. Right? That's a really good question.
Yeah. What's a common blind spot that you see where these high performing leaders who are already at a certain level to be entering into this engagement with you?
Yeah.
And you just notice it as, that's interesting that sort of blind spot existed, or that lack of awareness is something that can really change the game for them as a leader.
I think, a couple things come to mind, but the number one for sure, out of the gate, 100% of the time, I want to say, like, if not 100%, really close, is confidence. So what happens with really high performers? So if you look at someone who has the focus and the drive to really create something great, the way Dan has, or other leaders, they are their own worst critic, 100% of the time. Their perfectionism or what their bar is so high all the time. So what happens is the flip of that is that they say, I know I can, they can see they can do better. Everybody can see I can do better. Right. I mean, especially in hindsight. And then they start thinking about that all the time. So what happens is so funny, because these senior leaders look really confident to other people. Are like, oh yeah, no, Nate's totally confident, right? He completely is. He's in his game. He's doing his thing. Then I go coach Nate, and you're like, I'm terrified, right? Or I'm terrified in certain situations. And I would say that I call it a high performance disease, right? I don't think you can be at that level of performance without really being a tough critic on yourself.
The title of our episode is somewhere here in the last minute, somewhere around the high performance disease and people being their own worst critic.
Yeah.
Gosh, I come from a hockey background and was a professional player for a long time. And I only in recent years have admitted to people there were days, playing late in the third period or in overtime where you feel like you've never played before, and like you've never held a stick before. And those, the ones that can rise to the occasion so incredibly with everything on the line, it's a gift, because that interference of that lack of confidence is paralyzing to an athlete. And that's kind of what I'm hearing come through. We're all humans, right? Whether we're CEO of somewhere or managing a large organization, or we're an athlete.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this coaching thing is about humans.
Right. That's right.
Oversimplified. That's really all it is.
So, the way I've kind of worked with that is what I ask people is, okay, so what's good, right, and true? So whether or not we're talking about like, okay, so I'm not, I don't really know how I should speak up in this board meeting. I don't want to be too obnoxious. I don't want to be a wallflower. And then my question is, so what's good, right, and true? So what I think about is if you're being totally aligned with your values and your mission, then that's good. It's kind of good by definition, right? So I'm whatever your values are, but I'm kind, I'm respectful, I have integrity, I leave it better than I found it. That's good. And then this question of what's true is like, okay, does Nate Leslie add value in a meeting or in a podcast or whatever, whatever, like, yes, we can say that's true. Okay, what's value? This is a really big question. Take a look at that. So for leaders to really understand what's going on here. So if I really can figure out what's true. So what's happened is we're trying to, you talk about hockey, right? We're trying to like control a marionette that's on the ice, and we're up in the box, and we're like trying to control this player. So, if I'm in the board meeting and I'm receiving input and I'm now thinking about like, well, how am I supposed to play this? And then that's coming out, you're lost before you start, right? You actually like have to be in the meeting. You have to be on the ice, and you have to have enough confidence because that your values are good. That really, so that's this first part of like, okay, can I really come into contact with my values are good? They are trustable. If I'm a good person, then that's good. And then I can see what's going on in the room. And back to this, where we kind of started our conversation of all the way to the tombstone, like I can see the whole of my life, and that what I'm doing now is building what happens in the future and will ultimately be my legacy. So I can hold the horizontal understanding of what the board meeting, I can hold a vertical understanding of like where I am in life and what my life's about. And I'm clear on that, then I call that total clarity. Then that's what's true. And when I say, so what's good and what's true is what's right. So that's really the move to make.
Wow. And what's the challenge when those values and mission of, say, the organization don't line up with that of the leader?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. That's a really good question. I think there's probably 3 layers of answers. So the question is, where are you supposed to be? So we need great leaders, and I've coached many of them that are in the middle of a very difficult firm, right? So a firm that mostly it's about squeezing money out, right? And having people suffer and not actually being a force for good in the world, right? Just making a bunch of money. But we actually need leaders to be in those organizations, pushing back and coming to what's good and right and true. So if you can feel as a leader, you decide yourself, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing amazing things. And I've coached many leaders who have really big organizations that are a shield against the machine, right?
That's their role. That's their purpose. That's their,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And that's very valuable. So I would say if that's where you're supposed to be, then be there. And then sometimes you're not supposed to be there anymore.
Right.
Because I'm supposed to go work for an organization or create an organization that is aligned with my values. And let's get that snowball bigger. So I think that's also a really valid answer. But you have to look inside yourself and ask, where am I supposed to be right now?
That's back to that sacredness of that leadership role. Sometimes it's to be in service of the others who are also struggling, that don't have as much of a voice in the scenario. There's a lot of value to be offered there, but also to be taken from the work that you're doing.
Yeah. So if people ask me, some of the places I coach, I'm happy to go into a firm where like actually I could provide a lot of value in helping to get closer to what's true and get closer to people to actually align with their values, because they're off kilter. Right. And people are like, oh, why do you coach there? I'm like, because I'm supposed to be there. Right. I can help. I don't only coach the Dalai Lama and his, groupies.
Right. Yeah. The purpose of work. We've tackled that a little bit, but it's one of the questions that I asked you in my pre-interview questions. Just the most important question I could ask you, and you replied with the purpose of work.
Right. What is the purpose of work? Right? What's the most important thing?
Yeah.
So we talked a little about that on the leadership side, right? But the idea that when someone comes into contact with this idea of actually the purpose of work, the most crucial purpose for me is to give me an opportunity to grow. to actually allow me to expand as a human. And that becomes what's primary. So we still need to add value and we need to pay bills. But when it becomes primary, that actually I'm here to grow, then first of all the drama completely fades away. Because one of the things that, what we want, so interesting, like nobody wants to live in the Truman Show, right? So really interesting movie where, the Truman character was, had a perfect life and nothing went wrong. And so I asked people, okay, do you want to live in the Truman Show? Everybody's like, no, I don't want to live in the Truman Show. Okay. Do you want, everything to be pretty easy for you? No, I want challenge, right? Oh, okay. So right now you're facing a situation where you're fighting with your coworker and your boss, has a half-baked strategy. So is that good or bad? Because you told me you wanted these challenges and you don't want to live in the Truman Show. Like you want conflict and you also have these values that you really want to come into around integrity and respect and leave it better than you found it. And it sounds like you have a perfect situation to really work with that right here.
Yeah.
And when you're at home and, you're having a beer and drinking Netflix or drinking a beer and watching Netflix, right? That's not necessarily presenting. So so when that stack comes in of like, okay, so number one is I'm here to grow. Then I am grateful for challenge. And also I want to be helpful. I mean, all my clients have values of some level of leave it better than you found it, or servant leadership, or really trying to help, right, in their leadership. Well, I'm so glad that this is broken so that you can fix it, because if everything was not broken, you would have nothing to do, right? So as soon as that becomes your lens, then you're grateful. And I'll tell you, there's actually a little piece for me, like, as when I was building my practice, most coaches, there's a lot of great coaches out there that have a hard time building their practice because that's a totally different skill set. And what I realized is, okay, I really want to grow past my own fear of rejection. So I have a very core fear of rejection, right? That's like, there's different types of people. And so I could talk about that at some great length, but I have a lot of fear of rejection. And then I went from being internal coach to actually being external and having to sell. And I realized, like, wow, okay, so I have all these opportunities for people to reject me. And when every chance I get to get rejected, then I get to work with this fear of rejection that I have. So the purpose of work for me was actually to grow. And then if I was on a sales pitch and didn't work out, then I got rejected. I got to work with myself. Right. So great. So I actually came up with the phrase that you can't reject me enough, because I have so much growth to do. I want all the rejection I can get. It's actually even more, because I want to be free of my fear of rejection more than I want a successful coaching practice. I can go make money another way. I actually want to I want to really be free of this. So of course, what happened was, right, I said, okay, you can't reject me enough. Made it very easy for me to engage in conversations of sales. And then of course, what happened was, plenty of those, there wasn't a rejection. I got the business, and now, I've been sold out for 5 years. So that's how that works. So this idea of back to purpose of work, of like, whatever your fear is, the fear of not being right or not being perfect or not being included, work provides you that every day. And as soon as you grab onto that, changes the entire game. You get much more free and powerful.
I'm glad I asked. That's really insightful. I really like that. Just the opportunities that are before us, and gosh, it allows. I feel like I can feel from you that it allows you to believe what you believe in the face of all sorts of bias that people are bringing to the table. Right? When you believe the power of this to your core, it's okay if the person that you're selling to, the potential client, isn't there. Either they're not, or they get a little bit curious about it, and maybe one day they are.
Yeah, exactly. And I could say, probably my favorite testimonial, and as a client I'm still working with, is now the CRO of TrueWork, which is a fast growing firm, but was the top performing sales guy and sales leader in Cisco last quarter. He just actually joins TrueWork in a week. But he's like, I worked with this for a little while, this idea of like, really, his thing is giving freely. Like, okay, so if I really make that my commitment, he's like, I worked with it. And then he's like, and then I crossed the barrier where that just became what I do. Every interaction, I really am going to give myself freely to whoever I'm talking to. And he's like, his sales organization, I will tell you, Nate, was insane in Cisco. I got a chance to do a 360, talk to all those folks.
Mm-hmm.
They loved him, and the results spoke. He was the top performer in Cisco, which is like,
Wow.
I'm a huge audience or a huge population. And he's like, this is it. So now he's starting the tree work. He's just going to start out of the gate, just being fully coming from values, not worrying about anything else.
We've been talking theoretically a little bit, and there are some coaches listening to this who are earlier in their coaching journey than you, like me. This is actually a very sort of pragmatic question. You just described a leader at one organization going to another one. Have you had the opportunity to follow some clients from one company to another, role to another? Like, what could you share with a coach listener who's building a practice, just about what they might expect in the course of their career if they can stick with it for 17 years?
Yeah, I have a number of clients that I followed through. So actually, Pravesh, who I was just talking about, this will be his third organization. Also, my sexiest client, who's a guy who at Blue Origin, I don't know if you've been tracking this, is about to put tourists in space, right? So Jeff Bezos' space company is going to launch in a couple of months. So the program manager, SVP, that's in charge of that program is a client that I've had through also 3 organizations. So I think there's a couple of things. One is, often coaches will do it, which I really respect. Like, okay, so let's look at goals, right? And let's drive toward these goals. And then we're going to have a program. And then, then you'll be whatever, we'll be able to be at some level, right? And I definitely have goals as a coach, but I'm so interested in catching the client where they are not aligned with what is good, right, and true for them. So often we'll start a conversation and then we'll just take it off into a particular arena for that that period of time. So for me, like in terms of being a long-term coach, so I would say more than half my clients have been with me for more than 3 years. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm looking. I think I'm trying to look as deep as I can to provide as much value, and those kind of topics can take years to really unravel. As I talked about, Pravesh, very incredibly high performing human. You're saying, hey, look, this takes kind of 3 or 4 years to really get underneath all the way down. Yeah. I would say that one of the things I do for it, I think about, Steve Bennett, who's the Blue Origin guy. When he was between gigs or we weren't actively coaching, I say for sure, and to all my clients, like, call me anytime, happy to spend an hour with you. Let's go do something real whenever you need it. Mm-hmm. I'm not actually in, I like that I get paid, but I'm not in it for the money. I'm actually here for you. And Steve's a great example of like kind of in between spaces. That really kept us connected. Mm-hmm.
Right. That offering just stay connected, and things ebb and flow, and, to a new coach starting building that practice, that they're just like a lot of solopreneur work, things come and go, and those relationships are really important. Yeah. Pravesh, actually, you mentioned he's not surprisingly, then, did Dan recommend that I speak to him as well, and I've been in touch with him, and he'll be on a future podcast. So I'm just going to keep going down. You guys are my best referral sources to share this great insight with everybody.
Pravesh is amazing. Cool. Amazing.
Yeah. Yes. And that'll be fun because it's the other side of someone receiving the coaching, right? And I'm loving talking to leaders who are benefiting and believe in the process, and then also to coaches doing the work to help them on that journey. As we wrap towards a close, I believe it was you that helped Dan and his team identify some values on a trip to Mars.
Could be.
That as they were coming to figure out what values and what their mission was, that you gathered a group of them and pretended to take a trip to Mars, and that I believe it was you, they looked at, okay, who's coming with us,
right?
And they were able to gain their identify their core values based on the amazing people they already had. Mm-hmm. rather than the opposite, like a couple of leaders get together, decide what's important, and then go out and kind of make it fit. I'm putting you on the spot a little bit here, but just that idea of an exercise of identifying values of a team by the great people that are already there. Is that ringing a bell, or do you have any insight to offer there? Because we started the conversation with the word values, and just any insight there would be awesome.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, Dan has really, when he and I started this conversation about who do you really want to be and how do you let that guide you in the middle of conflict or stressful situations, he really grabbed onto that, and he had the advantage of at a camp that was really, obviously a CampMinder, camps. So his camp, they had the values up on this big arch. So when you walked into camp, you could see the values of Camp Taekwondo or whatever it was, right? Mm-hmm. So we really talked about doing that at CampMinder. Of when you go into the room, can you see the values up? And he's even gone so much further than that. But I think that what people get a lot of value out of in the Mission to Mars exercise. I did not come up with this. This is a classic exercise. But when you look around the room, who would you take to Mars and why is really kind of the easy entry of, okay, if I have 5 people that I could go to Mars with, and now, we're not going to have any other resources, no access to anybody, who would those 5 people would be? Or if you're a leader and you look at your team and say, okay, would I take these people with me to Mars? And if not, why not? That begins to really help you, first of all, develop yourself, and then also think about your development plan for your team. Because often, leaders don't necessarily know, okay, what do I really need to develop in this team? Mm-hmm. Right. So that provides that answers. So what Dan was doing was that, that exercise was part of what we did around the CampMinder core values. So we brought all those discussions out in that group. And then it turned out that there was so much resonance in that CampMinder senior team. I can't say I wouldn't know what would happen if there wasn't, right? Mm-hmm. That might have been telling in itself. And part of Dan's success is his intuition. But I think the thing that I would have folks listen to as they kind of think about is, would the people in my life choose me on their Mars team?
Right on.
And if not, if I don't know, could I find out? And if not, why not? And then I might think about making my own development plan, kind of starting around that.
Would the people in my life take me on their Mars team? That might be the other episode title. We'll see what we come up with. I'm going to leave it right there, because that is a great coaching question to leave it with. And if not, why not? Mm-hmm. Stephen, real pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you for sharing your decades of insight with our listeners, and really grateful to have the chance to meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Nate. Thanks for taking the time with me. Really fun.
Thanks for listening to Leading with Curiosity. Please share, follow, and rate the show so that other leaders can make positive change in the world. Connect with Nate at nateleslie.ca. And remember, the brain behaves very differently when encouraged to think rather than told to listen.